Hey there, and welcome. I'm Anna Hartman, and this is Unreal Results, a podcast where I help you get better outcomes and gain the confidence that you can help anyone, even the most complex cases. Join me as I teach about the influence of the visceral organs and the nervous system on movement, pain, and injuries, all while shifting the paradigm of what whole body assessment and treatment really looks like. I'm glad you're here. Let's dive in. Hello. Welcome back to where are we? Sheesh. Welcome back to another episode of the Unreal Results podcast. Where are we? I'm home in San Diego. This weekend, it was Labor Day weekend. I was celebrating my niece's 14th birthday. Can't believe she's 14. For those of you following along and you're like, wait, I thought her niece was 4. Yes, I have a 14-year-old niece and a 4-year-old niece. They are sisters. They are 10 years apart. You can take that as whatever you want to know. But yes, my sister's kids are very spaced out. I have another niece, technically, my brother-in-law's daughter from his first marriage. She's in her mid-20s. So they are all 10 years apart. I've got to hang out with actually all 3 of them this weekend or this last 5 days, which was great. The 14-year-old, she's a freshman in high school this year. It's just like a whole vibe, right? I will say that the thing she had going on in middle school, whatever that was, it seems to be getting better already within a week of high school. So I'm happy about that. We went to Six Flags on Sunday, which when I was a kid, that was called Marine World Africa USA in Vallejo, California. It was fun. I drove 7 14-year-olds and chaperoned 7 14-year-olds. It was really fun. I was happy that Sophie, my niece, still wanted to sit by me on rides, which made my heart really happy. She seemed to have a great time. All the kids seemed to have a great time. And honestly, there wasn't really a ton of drama, which I was like anticipating that there could have been. So super stoked about that. But with that said, yeah, I am a little tired from the walking. It wasn't quite like a day at Disneyland walking, but it was still like 12,000 steps. And I don't think it's as much even the steps because, there are days I go on a walk and I walk 12,000 steps, but it was just the amount of hours on my feet. So yeah, I was tired. Came home yesterday and was going to record the podcast, but I was just like too tired. And so I rested instead, finished my book I was reading, which I read All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. It was so good. It was funny though, because the first 300 pages, I was like, I don't know why everybody thinks this is the greatest book ever, because it hasn't been. And it was like good enough to keep me engaged, because usually I will put a book down if I don't love it, especially that far into it. But it was engaging enough to keep me there, just not like make me like want to like not put it down. And then at page 300, it got so good. And then, the last like 220 pages, I could barely put it down. 100% one of my, I would say it's probably my top 10 favorite books, to be honest, which is funny that it took that kind of turn. Some of you might have seen there's a Netflix like mini series or TV or movie or something like on it too. And so it's about World War II and specifically like the use of radio in that era. And so there's a little science-y aspect to it, which I love. And he had a quote towards the end of the book that I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I keep telling people. And he says it so much more poetically. Like, leave it to a Pulitzer Prize winning author, right? So that book did win the Pulitzer Prize. I think it came out in 2017. But anyways, he wrote, "We all come into existence as a single cell, smaller than a speck of dust, much smaller. Divide, multiply, add, and subtract. Matter changes hands, atoms flow in and out, molecules pivot, proteins stitch together, mitochondria send out their oxidative dictates. We begin as a microscopic electrical swarm. The lungs, the brain, the heart. 40 weeks later, 6 trillion cells get crushed in the vise of our mother's birth canal and we howl. Then the world starts in on us." I mean, did that give you chills? I'm like, that is wow. This book actually, and I think it was the connection to some of the sciencey stuff in it, reminded me of one of my other all-time favorite books, The Signature of All Things by Elizabeth Gilbert. And I think too, just the writing style was like so poetic. Like, I just really loved it. Like, there is such a difference between writing and then telling a story and then like painting a picture and making you feel like you're there. Like, geez, I am like constantly in awe of really anybody creative, because like, like people who create videos and movies and stuff, like they have that same way to like evoke feeling and evoke like just this like profound feeling. And I'm just like, wow, amazed. But anyways, this is not turning into a book podcast. It's on my mind, and that quote was great. And actually, there was more sciencey quotes that I'll be sharing. Maybe not on the podcast, but definitely on Instagram from that book, because, like I said, it was good. But today's podcast is inspired by what's coming up on the calendar, and that is the next cohort of the online LTAP Level 1 course. It's going to be, I think, October 7th is the date it starts. So I'll be opening up the doors to the public a week or two before that. And actually, the day this podcast drops, it will be opened to the people on the wait list. So if you're not on the wait list, you can still join it, I believe. I'll make sure Joe links it in the show notes so my loyal followers can still have access to the waitlist sale, because the waitlist pre-sale is the biggest discount I offer. And you save up to $400 on the whole bundle. And also you have first priority to the 2025 in-person courses. So dates and locations will be announced to the wait list only today for the next 4 days, and then it'll be a secret for a few more weeks, and then I'll let the world know once it's open to the public. So make sure you're on the wait list, and I would love to see you there. So with that said, every time I do an online cohort of the LTAP, I offer a free week-long experience in a mini online course that starts to teach you this new lens of view and teaches you the first test of the LTAP level 1, of the LTAP. So the first test of the LTAP is a SI joint mobility test. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you might have heard, and I did a whole episode on the SI joint. It's actually the most downloaded episode. I think it's over 1,000 downloads, which for me is a lot. The whole podcast itself, I don't know, this episode is 70 something. The whole podcast itself, I've had 30,000 downloads. So over 1,000 have been just this one podcast about the SI joint. It's called The Mysterious, Misunderstood SI Joint. And so the reason why I'm recording another podcast on it is, well, one of the reasons is once is never. You can never hear this enough to really understand, because that podcast said, it is a very misunderstood joint. It's a misunderstood joint assessment, and Therefore, a lot of people are like, why are you using it? And part of the reason why it's misunderstood, and part of the reason why I feel like I need to like champion the use of it, is because a lot of people, and read by people, I mean clinicians, who sometimes see what I am teaching on Instagram, which is like, first of all, like Instagram, you're trying to teach something in, between 30 and 90 seconds. And then some people come at you and are like, this is not correct. And I'm like, no shit. Can you teach this in 90 seconds? So right now, since I'm ramping up to that free course to try to get people exposed to the LTAP and potentially interested in joining the LTAP level 1 course, I have some of my old posts on ads to specifically physical therapists and athletic trainers. Now, first of all, I know that what I teach, though technically is for everyone, like all clinicians, it is also not for everyone. I 100% fully understand that the world of which we are clinicians in has a certain model, certain way of practicing, that when you're taught it in school or in some con ed courses, you think it is 100% fact. And you also might be very held on to the fact that you are an expert in the body. You are an expert in exercise. You are an expert in human movement. And so I know when I come at you with a new model, a model that sort of inherently tells you that the model you are previously or currently using may have some holes in it, may have some things wrong about it. When your ego is attached to that, it feels uncomfortable. It makes you feel some sort of way. And then your instant response is to go on the defense and be like, you don't know what you're talking about. And specifically for the SI joint mobility tests, people who are like, I'm smarter than you, are like instantly, Anna, why are you using that assessment test? It has been shown to be not reliable. Both intra and inter-rater reliability has been shown to be unreliable. So why are you even using that as an assessment test? And as I often tell people when I'm teaching this in the courses, like, yes, I know. I actually don't live under a rock. I'm very intelligent. I also went to school. I also can read research and do, even though I'm like shit on all the evidence-based medicine trolls. Like, I actually do read research. I actually am interested in research. In fact, I go to the Fascial Research Congress every 3 years, and it is an actual like scientific research conference. Like, it's a conference where like all they're doing is presenting their research, which for those of you who have gone to like a physical therapy conference or the NATA annual symposium, like that's like the free comm, right? The free communications, when students stand up there and like, here's my study that I did to get my degree, and here's the methods, and here's the statistical analysis, and this is what the results say, and this is what I recommend. That's the boringest part of those symposiums. Like, I'm just telling you, like, I enjoy that. And I think there's value in it. And I want to continue to champion people who do research, because it helps to be like, it's part of the scientific process. And so it's not like I don't know that the gold standard SI joint mobility test, which is the Gillet's test or the March test, or also called the Stork test, It's not like I don't know that research papers have shown it to be unreliable. However, when you look at it in this new model of understanding how the body works, not as just a body as in the orthopedic musculoskeletal system, but the body as an entire organism, it makes sense. And actually, you would expect these research papers to show that it's unreliable. And this also means that just because it's unreliable from an inter-rater and intra-rater reliability test doesn't mean it's not giving us reliable and valuable information for our patient's body. So let's do this episode, right? I don't want to teach the whole course, right? That's like, if you're interested in how I teach this and like the nuances of it and like to learn it differently and use it in your practice, like come to the free course. The doors open next week and I'll be shouting it from the rooftops on all my socials, on my email list, on the podcast. So, next week the link will be available. Formerly, it was called the Results Cheat Code. I think I'm changing the name this year. Last round, I called it Results Cheat Code, the Missing Link. I think it will probably be just the missing link this time, but I'm not 100% sure. But no, it's my free course coming up. Join that, and we can go in deep, right? We'll have 2 90-minute calls that I can talk about it, plus like all the access to me that week you want to pick my brain. So today's episode, I just want to talk about this, the 1, 2, 3, 4, the 4 journal articles that showed that the Gillette's test was not reliable. I want to talk about those articles. And those research articles. I want to discuss them a little bit because even now, let's step back into the old, well, I call it the old model, but the current model that the physical therapy and athletic training world operates on, a biomechanical orthopedic model of seeing whole body movement, pain, injury, etc. When we're operating under that current model and we're looking at these research articles, there is also some significant red flags when you really understand how to read the research. Actually, you don't even have to really understand to read the research. You just have to read it with a common sense brain. But you read these articles and you're like, they're not actually very strong. They're not strong. What's the word I'm looking for? They're not strong research projects. I don't know. My brain is not working. But so let's talk about them. So there's 4 studies. The most recent, I believe, and I am sure somebody will tell me I'm wrong. I think, well, there was one in 2020, but when you actually look at that one, because the title talks about the reliability, but when you look at the title of that article from 2020, it's actually looking at the reliability of diagnosing a painful SI joint. So using these tests to diagnose a painful SI joint. And that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about diagnosing or assessing, finding out if a joint is hypomobile, if it's not moving or not. So the most recent study to look at just true mobility of the SI joint, so the ability for the ilium to move on the sacrum, or vice versa, the sacrum to move on the ilium, for movement to occur between the sacrum and the ilium, or between L4, L5 and the ilium, or between L4, L5 and the sacrum, right? Like that is a true SI joint. It was in 1999. In 1999, they decided to do another test because they recognized that the 3 tests before that, the 3 research articles before it, the 3 things that everybody relied upon of interpreting the validity, the reliability of this test, I shouldn't say validity because that's not what we're arguing about. It's a whole nother can of worms. So the reliability of the test was, that's why they did it, right? They were like, those old articles, those old research things, like they have some flaws to them. And so we're going to do a new one. And we want to like do it right or do it better. And so the old tests or the old articles I'll share was from the earliest one being from 1985. Then the next one in 1987. And then the next one in 1989. So we're going to talk about all of them. The first one and the last article were both published in the same journal, which is the Journal of Manipulative and Physiological Therapeutics. Now, first of all, and you might have heard me say this on the podcast episodes I've done on evidence-based practice, which I'll have Joe link those in the show notes. But first of all, that's the first a little bit of red flag. The Journal of Manipulative and Physiological Therapeutics, not throwing shade at them, not shit, but whatever, same difference. But I've literally never heard of them, except for from these studies. I will say the author of the study is known in the SI joint world. I think his first name's Peter, but his last name is Vander Worf. Ooh, I had a speech impediment as a kid, and those letters together, like, whew, that brings it out. WURF, Peter Vander Worf. Tough. You can even see my mouth straining to say that. That, if you know, in the SI joint pain provocation world, there is I think he is one of the researchers who put a cluster of tests together for diagnosing SI joint pain. So provocation tests. So anyways, he's like, I see that and I'm like, okay, well, I know he knows what he's talking about. But also, in general, like I was saying, this journal is not a well-known journal. It's not a gold standard journal for physical therapy, for sports medicine, for orthopedics, for medicine in general. So that in itself is a little bit, I don't want to say it's a red flag. It's a yellow flag. Could be a great article. Don't know, but there's a reason why. And you should know, if you went to grad school that did a thesis or dissertation, you should know this. There's a reason why when it's not a well-known journal. The well-known gold standard journals have such high requirements for the statistical analysis that sometimes your master's theses or your doctoral dissertations are not good enough to be published in that. Or maybe the writing sucks. I don't know. But I know that the editorial boards and the process of getting accepted in the gold standard journal publications have a higher standard that the research is held to. So when you see research articles that are in unknown, not as well known professional journals, you have to sort of like take that with a grain of salt and ask like, well, why? And I don't know why. And like I said, this journal might not be that bad. I don't know, but I've never, like, going through school again. School for me was like over 20 years ago now. But 20 years ago, when I was doing all my research and like really diving into all the journals, like I didn't ever see this. So, and maybe it's more common in a different one, like a different profession, or sometimes different countries, right? Different countries have different ones. But anyways, so that's the first yellow flag, is the journal it's in. But then when you continue to look into it, we'll go back to the ones from the 80s. So 2 of the 3 from the 80s they modified Gillet's original test. So Gillet's original test, he was a chiropractor. I say was, I'm assuming he's dead, but I don't know. He could be alive. I don't know when he was born or whenever he first told the world about this test. I don't know how old he was. So the Gillette's test is hands against the wall. So your arms distance from the wall, and so you have some support as the patient. Tester hands, one on the spinous process of L4, L5, S1, 2, or 3. And then the other one on PSIS for the most part. There is a variation where we go down to the ischial tuberosity or the ischial spine. We're not going to talk about that right now because the standard is L5, S1, S2. Standard is L5, S1, and S3. With the other hand on the PSIS. All right? So these tests, the old tests in the 80s, they did not specify if the hands were on the wall, first of all. The hand placements were that, but the patient, Gillet describes contralateral hip flexion with a bent knee up to 90 degrees. These tests used straight leg hip flexion. Now, I see why they wanted to do straight leg hip flexion. Potentially. When you think about why they chose to do that, because again, this test is looking at SI joint mobility, and they're trying to see, like, let's see if we can get the ilium to move on the sacrum. That's what this test is looking at, more than the sacrum moving on the ilium. They're looking at the ilium moving on the sacrum. And I could imagine that when they were thinking, like, let's strain the leg, they're thinking, well, then the hamstrings, if there's any hamstring tightness, it will sooner pull on the nominant and create motion at a lower range of motion than above 90. So you don't have to restrict a certain range of motion degree. But that in itself means that when you then tell me that the March test is unreliable, based on these findings, they're not even looking at the same test. And that's how research is. You're not supposed to extrapolate. Period. The interpretation or the way the test was done, right? So that means those two tests from 1985 and 1987, like, we can't even say that. They're looking at the same thing. For the sake of argument, we'll continue and say that wasn't that big of a deal. And so we'll move on to tell you the next problem. The next problem with the test, in my mind, is the one for 1985 used 17 patients. 17. That's not very many people. That's not a very large N. For most studies to have good chance of giving you any good information about reliability or validity, we need more than 17 people. 17 people is not very much at all. So that also makes it kind of a shitty test or shitty research method. And then the 1987 article used 53 students. Better, but still not great. And then also, let's talk about the fact that, well, I don't know that I didn't pull the 1985 article today. I think I might have it. I'm not really sure, but I didn't pull it. So I don't know what the age for the 17 patients were. But in the 1987, 53 students, you can assume that they're students at a college. And so they're in their early 20s, which nothing wrong. No shame to early 20s. But also, like, that doesn't give us a very good example of the normal population that's seeking physical therapy or athletic training, maybe athletic training services more so than physical therapy. The other problem, which is talked about in the 1999 article, is the Omnibus Score. I don't even know what that is because I don't understand statistics, but it's one of the statistical analyses they use to determine that those tests were unreliable. And it's been talked about in science since then that that way of scoring is not the best way of scoring to figure out. So that's actually why they're repeating this test in 1999, because they're like, you know what? They used the Omnibus Score back then, and we think there's a better way. We think there's a better statistical analysis to tell us if this test is reliable or not. So we're going to redo it and do it again. And then the tests were 1989. I don't know why I don't have a ton of details on this. It was maybe because I saw how many patients it was, how many subjects it was, and I was like, well, that's a shitty study anyways. But Herzog, let's see. Reliability of motion palpation procedures to detect SI joint fixations. Same. Okay, all interesting. All 4 articles have been published in the same journal, the Journal of Manipulative and Physiological Therapeutics. So this one from 1989, Herzog et al. It used 11 patients. So again, very low number of subjects. That's a red flag. That's not great. It does not say what kind of test they use, if they used a bent knee or straight leg like the other 2. I'm assuming since it was in the 80s, around the same time as these other studies, that they might have also used the Omnibus Score, because I think the Omnibus Score must have been in the 80s the way to do this statistical analysis. Just like any science gets better and gives us better information. That's the same for statistics, I believe. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not a statistician, but I would assume. So now we're to this recent 1999 study. So, I already told you, we already know that the journal I don't love, but we do know at least this is using more traditional Gillette's test, the more traditional March or Stork test. Okay, great. Now, interestingly enough, they also looked at what changes with your, with the hand on the spine being at L5, being at S1, or being at S3, if there's any changes. And we actually go into that quite a bit. Well, we talk about it a little bit in the LTAP level 1, but we really dive in LTAP level 2 on how just changing that hand placement can give us a different information too. So more on that if you take my courses. But they did all 3, which I actually like that they did all 3. But also the fact that they did all 3 is a yellow flag, knowing what I know now, which I'll talk about it as well. But knowing what I know, I'm like, well, now you're testing 3 different ligament directions. So if you're testing 3 different things, but grouping them all together as if they're the same, is that really going to always get you the best information? I don't know. You would actually have to do an additional research project to determine if it makes a difference or not. I don't know until you test it. Okay. So next thing, they used 41 subjects. Again, they were students. The people performing the tests were 2 final year physiotherapy students. So they were not even graduated yet. They were not actual physical therapy or athletic trainer professionals. They were students, which a lot of research out there is. So again, like, there's nothing wrong with it being a student, but I'm going to also say that's a yellow flag because the palpation skills of most new students and young professionals are very poor. And the anatomy there is a little challenging for even the most seasoned professional. So 41 subjects, they were all students. Their average age was 23 years old. So they were all younger student population, older for students, but babies. Not babies, you know what I mean, adult babies. Of the 41 subjects, they threw 3 of them out, and then 1 of them did not show up for the return test. The way they did the tests was They came in over a 3-week span, these patients, and you got tested one day. I forget how many times they did the test, but they let the person go through 10 repetitions on their own before they actually did the testing procedure. So 10 repetitions, then the test procedure on the right and on the left. And then 4 days later, they came back in and they did it again. And both researchers tested it. So they compared the reliability between them and the reliability between those 4 days later. Okay. So their final subject number was 37 people. And here I am again going, 37 people. You saw that the earlier studies did not very many people. In fact, the study in 1987 did 53 people, so more than you did. But yet, you could only get 40 people, which, hey, again, I went through it in college. Like, it's hard. Recruiting subjects is hard, especially when you have a short period of time that you need to get your research done in order to graduate on time and not spend $1 million to stay in school to get all the subjects, right? So it's like, I get it. I get why that happens. But also you have to remember that 37 subjects, all within 23 years old, plus or minus 6 months or 2 years even, like, that's not that many people. That's not a very good sample size. Even if we combine all these 3 studies, which we wouldn't, because we would throw out the ones that use the old testing protocol, like when we do a meta-analysis, it's still not going to give us a ton of patients. It's going to give us, like, let's do the math, 37, 47, 48, 90, 100. We got maybe 115 people total in these 4 things. Like, that's not very many people. And of course, when you run the statistical analysis, you run it to see if your subject number is appropriate enough to give you a appropriate amount of people to get some significant data from, but also, like, you can manipulate the data to make it work. And often things get published in journals that are not gold standard journals when they don't have very good subject numbers, because gold standard journals are also like, hey, looks great, but come back when you have more subjects and, like, the data is better. So I say so a lot. I know this. Sidebar, besides me saying so a lot, when I'm listening to someone, one of the things I say is like, oh, okay. And I'm like, I hear myself say it and I'm like, stop saying that. Anyways, the thing I'm trying to tell you here is, yes, I see these studies when the people come on my posts, that's people being the ego-based clinicians that think they know more than me and think I'm an idiot and don't probably even read the caption very deeply, or don't believe that the model that they're currently using is wrong, which that we got to start somewhere, right? That is where we're starting, is we think the model we're in works and we're just used to mediocre results. The biggest comment I get is, this test is unreliable. This test is unreliable. This test is unreliable. Sometimes I write them back. Sometimes I don't. Depends on what kind of mood I'm in. But I was like, you know what? Let's just film a podcast on it. Because maybe you're just nice and you haven't said that to me. Maybe you're a nice person and you don't say things on people's posts when you think you know better. You just move on and ignore it. Chances are you like me. You know I'm smart. You're here because you think there's something to learn. You're here because you're curious and you believe that perhaps something is missing in this model and you're not satisfied with mediocre results or even good results. But it's all relative how you describe good. I did a poll on Instagram the other day of, like, what do you consider good results? Some people, it was 7 out of 10, 70% was good. Like, they could help 7 out of every 10 people. Some people it was 8. Some people it was 9. No one, it was 10. And I'm here to tell you that good results should be 10 out of 10. or 9.5 out of 10. As close to 10 as we can get. And it is possible. It's not only possible, but it happens on a regular basis, not just for me, but for the other clinicians that have gone through the LTAP level 1 in the mentorship program. And so I also wanted to do this because it's like, yes, I get it. Sometimes the research contradicts what we know works in our practice. And there's nothing wrong with that, because then you go back to the research and you're like, well, how good was this research? Because maybe I'm getting different information because I have a bigger population size, or I have better palpation skills, or I understand anatomy better, or like me, I'm using this test in a different model. Now, this is where I'm going to say, go back to that old episode and listen. One of the things that makes the SI joint so challenging. So the other thing, so when I said at the beginning of this podcast, even I said, in this model that I operate out of, this whole organism approach, this approach to movement, and that includes the viscera, that includes the nervous system, the vascular system, the lymphatic system, that includes understanding how the organism is driven by the autonomic nervous system's drive to survive. When we look at the SI joint mobility test in this model, I actually would never expect it to be reliable. I would never expect my patient to come in 4 days after I examine them and get the same exact outcomes when it comes to the SI joint. And this is because the SI joint is what Jean-Pierre Barral calls a visceral joint. It is a joint whose mobility is checked when there is a strategic it's called a strategic hypomobility. The mobility of the joint is checked when the body is protecting or having tensions around visceral organs or the nervous system. It's going to affect the SI joint. The body does not grant us that mobility. It is a way of protecting the organism. And so even within a session, I would not expect to get the same results. So what is that going to do with the traditional intra-relator and intra-rater reliability? It's going to say it's not reliable. Because all that study is saying is that when I do a test on somebody and I do it again, I'm going to get the same result. And also when Joe does it next to me, he's going to get the same result as me. And inherently, the way the SI joint acts and the way that it can be limited from a hypomobility standpoint strategically, not structurally, means that it is constantly changing in response to what the body is dealing with. And what the body is often dealing with is the drive to protect the vital organs and protect the nervous system and protect the whole organism. And the fundamental way it does to protect things, especially when they cannot be protected by a hard frame, is to limit mobility, is to change our output. Our output is mobility, movement, pain, right? So I would never expect the SI joint mobility test to be reliable, to be honest. And there's some other joints that I would kind of expect that too. But the difference between like in the shoulder and in the SI joint is the SI joint has very little movement. So when it doesn't move, it's noticeable. But when my shoulder doesn't move, like who's to say that this is not moving or this is not moving? Or is not moving just not moving? Right? Do you see how the nuance of it changes? Like, no wonder there's such argument on the SI joint, right? It itself, especially in this model, tells us that it's just different. Whew. So, as you can tell, I'm super passionate about this because I don't want people to throw out this test from their practice, because 4 studies from, as my 14-year-old niece would say, 4 studies from the last century tells us it's unreliable. Somebody, 1, do some new studies. 2, do them right. 3, maybe we just need to write an article about how the joint is influenced by so much more than just the musculoskeletal structure of the ligaments and the bones and the tendons and the shape, the architecture. So that's it. Hope you found it helpful. Be on the lookout for next week's doors opening to the new free course and mini course. And also, if you know you're in for the LTAP, join the waitlist today and get access to that 4-day pre-sale. It is from Wednesday, whatever that day is. What day is it? I got a calendar right here. Wednesday the 4th to Sunday the 8th. Hello. Little Addendum was just linking all the research articles for you, and I want to say that I did speak wrong to the test that was done in the research article from 1985. It was in a better journal. It was in Physical Therapy, the journal Physical Therapy, which is a little bit more reputable. It was also performed by physical therapists that specialize in orthopedic physical therapy and have been trained in SI joint examination, which I'm still curious how many years of experience those testers had, but whatever. It was 8 testers, so we'll save that for another day, what I think about that. But they tested 13 different tests in 17 patients in 2 clinical settings. And they found all of the tests were poor reliability with less than 70% agreement. And 2 of the tests were, but they relied on subjective information, and it was more about pain, I believe, than it was mobility. So this test, better journal, I like that. More seasoned clinicians like that. Still super low subjects, so don't like that. Too much testing things, I believe. Looking at all 13. And then also it looks like they're focusing on pain more than mobility. And going back to what I already said, they use the other variation of Gillette's test with a straight leg. So I still don't love this test in general, but I did want to say that I spoke about it incorrectly earlier. And but it still has a lot of yellow flags for me. Just not as many as the other. Oh, look, it does have a full text. Look at that. We can read the whole article. I'll link it in the show notes for sure. I'm linking all of these articles in the show notes. Oh, I don't think it's free access though. So it is in the Physical Therapy and Rehabilitation Journal, which is associated with the APTA. So it's definitely a more reputable one, but it was from 1985. So they also used that old scoring system of statistical analysis for reliability. So lots of yellow flags still, but I'll link it all and you can read it yourself.